One of the most common complaints people have with Naval is the incredibly long grind to get to destroyers and larger vessels. While tiers 1 and 2 may appear short, they can take much longer to get through than it may first appear. In today's video, I'm going to be focusing on the first two tiers and giving some general tips for how to get through them as efficiently as possible. This will be assuming that the player doesn't purchase any premiums, though if you do want to pick up a low tier premium, that does make the grinding process a lot faster. The first thing to note is the structure of the research tree, as this is what decides the grind order. Every country has the same general layout, with a few changes between them. You need 5 vehicles to get out of Tier 1, and 2 vehicles to get out of Tier 2. Both of these tiers are split into 2 horizontal lines. The top line of Tier 1 is normally PT boats, while the bottom line tends to have larger vessels such as sub-chasers. In Tier 2, the top line ranges from PT boats to artillery barges to river boats, while the bottom line has vehicles such as hydrofoils, frigates, and post-war vehicles. The second line of vehicles is obscenely expensive, with many trees having vehicles that cost more than 5.7 cruisers, meaning that if the player's goal is destroyers, it's worth ignoring these temporarily. One exception is Italy, who only has one line of vehicles in Tier 2 at the moment. Their tree is a bit different, and I'll come back to it later in the video. In Tier 2, every country has a boat right before the first Tier 3 destroyer that's far more expensive to research than it really should be. This is the biggest progress gate in the entire naval grind. Using the American tree as a reference, the PT-314 is 14,000 RP and the Clemson DD-336 is 18,000 RP. The PT-59, sat right between the two, is 50,000 RP. This roadblock is present in every single naval tree other than Italy, though is notably less of an issue in the Japanese tree, as the Shonen is only 26,000 RP. The PT-59, VS-10, PR-1204 Late, Fairmile C, and Shonen make the grind to destroyers much harder than it really should be, and due to this, the entire low tier grind of Naval is focused on getting past these ships as painlessly as possible. So, as with the other modes, we start with reserves. It's worth noting that naval reserves get 3 spawns on a single vehicle, and talismans for them are only 80 golden eagles, so that can actually make grinding the first 2 tiers much easier since you get 3 spawns of a talisman vehicle for the price of 1. To start grinding through a tree, I would recommend making a full lineup in Tier 1 and using that to get through Tier 2. It's worth planning ahead, as this can help push through the later tiers faster as well. Using America as an example, the SC-497 and PC-451 are pretty powerful vessels. They're larger and better armed than most ships at their BR, so it makes sense to go for them and make a 2.0 American lineup with a third vehicle of your choice. It's also worth considering the Tier 2 ships that you're required to grind through when initially making your Tier 1 lineup. America's PT-314 has a higher BR than any of their Tier 1 vehicles, so it might not fit a Tier 1 lineup well. In contrast, Japan's T-51B shares a BR with their Type K3 and Type K7, so going for those two can lead to a better lineup in the future without having to go out of your way to grind more Tier 2 ships. On the note of lineups, don't be afraid to leave a ship unpurchased or uncrewed if it's a higher BR than the ones you currently have. Having a single high BR ship in a lineup of lower BR ships unnecessarily up-tiers the lower ships, meaning that it might be harder to have a good match and actually slow your progress. For example, if you are grinding through Germany and have the first 2 1.7 R boots and research the 2.3 R boot, it may be a good choice not to crew it until you have the first S100, since matches would get much harder. If one of your vehicles is significantly higher BR than the others, but you still want to use it, just get a few universal backups from the Warbond shop and place them onto that vehicle. Now it's time to move on to Tier 2, where things change a lot. If your end goal is destroyers and larger ships, there are 2 ways to move through this tier. Getting a lineup of Tier 2 ships to grind the boat placed before the destroyer, or just grinding straight through it with your Tier 1 lineup. With Russia as an example, you could get some Tier 2 ships such as the PR-191M and the MBK PR-186 before researching the PR-1204 Late, but it would take significantly longer to reach destroyers by doing so. Tier 2 vehicles research destroyers faster, however, so it might be harder to grind out the first or second destroyer if you stick with Tier 1 alone. Italy, as I mentioned earlier, is an exception to this. For their tree, you only need to research the MV611 and MS472 to unlock Tier 3. Neither of these ships are overly expensive, so they have a straightforward, if boring, grind to their higher BRs. One last major thing to note is the BR of ships that you choose to grind with. Generally, it's best to stick with the BR of 2.3 and lower. Ships at 2.7 and higher can get up-tier defaced destroyers, which makes matches significantly more frustrating as most of these vehicles are helpless against destroyers. Staying at 2.3 and below means that you can generally 1v1 the vehicles that you'll realistically face. As for a few country-specific tips, most have some good lineups in the lower tiers. American 2.0, German 1.7 and 2.3, Russian 2.0, British 2.3, Japanese 2.3, and Italian 2.3 are all the best for grinding in these countries. Squatting up is also the best thing you can do, really. Joining a group of friends makes the game a lot more enjoyable and less frustrating during the long grind sessions. If you're looking for people to play with, my Discord server is a good place to meet up with other Naval players. The link is in the description. Thank you for watching. This is my first attempt at a kind of guide or tutorial video, so if you have any ideas for future videos of this type, be sure to let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Naval content.